There is a reason some people wake up powerful while others wake up already defeated. It is not luck. It is not talent. It is not money. It is the conversation happening inside their mind before the world even speaks to them. And most people have no idea that their inner voice is slowly destroying their confidence, their discipline, their peace, and their future every single morning. Before they even leave bed, they are already telling themselves they are tired, behind in life, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not strong enough. They start the day with doubt, fear, insecurity, and emotional weakness, then wonder why life keeps feeling heavy. But here is the truth nobody teaches you. Your mind listens to everything you say about yourself. Every thought becomes a command. Every repeated sentence becomes identity. And eventually your life begins responding to the words you speak internally every day. That means some people are not trapped by life, they are trapped by their own mindset, and once you understand this, your entire life changes. Because the difference between confident people and broken people is often the language they repeat to themselves consistently. One person wakes up feeding their mind excuses, the other wakes up feeding their mind power. One becomes emotionally controlled by life. The other learns how to control themselves. In this video, you are going to hear 12 powerful things you must start telling yourself every morning if you want to become mentally stronger, emotionally calmer, harder to manipulate, impossible to break, and dangerous to negativity. And I promise you this, if you truly listen until the end, you will never speak to yourself the same way again. There is a dangerous habit destroying millions of people silently, and most of them do not even realize they are trapped in it. They wake up every day emotionally dependent on other people's opinions. Their confidence rises when they are praised and collapses when they are ignored. Their mood changes based on how others respond to them. Their self-worth depends on text messages, attention, approval, validation, and acceptance. And over time, they slowly lose themselves without noticing it. That is why one of the most powerful things you can tell yourself every morning is this: I will not beg for respect anymore. Because the moment you start begging people to value you, you unconsciously announce that you do not value yourself enough. Think about that carefully. Human psychology always follows perceived value. When someone sees you constantly chasing approval, over-explaining yourself, tolerating disrespect, and fighting to be chosen, they stop seeing you as powerful. Not because you lack worth, but because desperation changes the energy you carry, and people feel energy before they understand words. This is why some individuals walk into a room and command respect without speaking loudly, without forcing attention, and without trying to impress anyone. Their power comes from emotional certainty. They know who they are. They are not negotiating their value with the world every 5 minutes. But most people never develop this mindset because they were conditioned from childhood to seek permission for their worth. They learned to become performers. They learned that being accepted mattered more than being authentic. So now they spend their lives shifting to keep people comfortable. Around one person they act softer. Around another person they act smaller. Around toxic people they become silent just to avoid conflict. Around disrespectful people they become overly nice, hoping kindness will finally earn appreciation. But respect built through self-betrayal never lasts. The painful truth is this: if you must constantly convince someone to treat you properly, they already made their decision about your value. And no amount of explaining will change a mind committed to misunderstanding you. Some people do not respect kindness because they mistake it for weakness. Some people only value what they fear losing. Some people only appreciate your presence after your absence teaches them what your presence was worth. That is human nature, and this is where emotional maturity becomes critical. Mature people stop forcing connections that require destruction to maintain. They stop chasing people who enjoy being chased. They stop shrinking themselves to fit inside environments that continuously disrespect their spirit. Because eventually you realize something profound. Every time you beg for basic respect, you abandon yourself a little more. And self-abandonment is one of the deepest forms of emotional pain. You can feel it internally when it happens. You laugh at jokes that insult you. You tolerate behavior that exhausts you. You remain loyal to people who continuously betray your trust. You stay available for individuals who only contact you when they need something. And after a while, resentment begins growing inside you because your soul recognizes what your mind is trying to ignore. You are not designed to live emotionally on your knees. The strongest people are not the loudest people. They are the people who developed standards. Standards change everything. Standards teach people how to approach you. Standards determine what you tolerate and what you walk away from. And the beautiful thing about standards is that they eliminate confusion. When you respect yourself deeply, certain behavior no longer becomes attractive to you. Chaos becomes exhausting. Manipulation becomes obvious. Fake connections become easy to detect. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop confusing temporary validation with genuine respect. And here is something most people are terrified to admit. Sometimes the fear of being alone keeps people trapped in disrespectful situations longer than they should stay. That fear destroys lives, because loneliness scares people so much that they accept emotional crumbs just to avoid emptiness. But there is something far more painful than loneliness. It is sitting beside people who make you feel invisible while pretending that connection still exists. That kind of loneliness damages the soul. You must understand this clearly. Walking away from disrespect is not arrogance. It is self-preservation. Protecting your dignity is not selfish. It is necessary. There comes a point where constantly giving people access to you, despite repeated disrespect, becomes a form of self-harm. And the older you become, the more you realize peace has a price. Sometimes the price is distance. Sometimes the price is letting go. Sometimes the price is disappointing people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. But protecting your mind is worth that cost. Every morning, remind yourself that your worth is not decided by how loudly people applaud you. Some of the greatest individuals in history were misunderstood while they were alive. Validation from others is unstable because people are inconsistent. One day they praise you, the next day they criticize you. If your identity depends on public opinion, your emotional state will always remain fragile. True confidence comes from internal alignment. It comes from knowing your principles, protecting your dignity, and refusing to betray yourself for temporary approval. And once you reach that mindset, something changes inside you permanently. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop begging. You simply become unavailable for disrespect. And ironically, that is often the moment people begin respecting you the most. Because the world responds differently to people who carry themselves with emotional certainty, not arrogance, not ego, certainty. So tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you look for validation, before you worry about who accepts you and who does not, stand in front of yourself and say this with conviction. I will not beg for respect anymore. The way I carry myself will speak for me. Because the moment you stop chasing your value, you finally begin living it. One of the biggest lies modern culture teaches people is that life should always feel comfortable. Everywhere you look, people are searching for shortcuts, quick relief, instant happiness, and painless success. The moment difficulty appears, they assume something must be wrong. The moment life becomes heavy, they begin questioning themselves. And because of this mindset, millions of people break emotionally the second pressure enters their life. That is why one of the most powerful things you can tell yourself every morning is this: I can survive hard days, not because you enjoy suffering, not because pain makes you special, but because strength is built through resistance, not comfort. Look carefully at the strongest people you know. The people with emotional control, discipline, wisdom, and resilience almost never had an easy life. Something tested them deeply. Something forced them to grow beyond who they used to be. Pain changed them. Pressure sharpened them. Responsibility matured them. Failure humbled them. Loss awakened them. Hard days introduce you to parts of yourself that comfort never reveals. And yet most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid discomfort instead of learning from it. They panic when life becomes uncertain. They collapse when rejection appears. They interpret temporary struggle as permanent failure. But life does not work that way. Difficulty is not evidence that your future is broken. Sometimes difficulty is evidence that your character is being developed. There is a version of you that cannot exist without struggle, a wiser version, a calmer version, a more disciplined version, a stronger version. But to meet that version of yourself, you must stop running from pressure every time life becomes uncomfortable. Because pressure reveals identity. Anybody can stay positive when everything is easy. Anybody can speak confidently when life is going their way. But who are you when things fall apart? Who are you when nobody encourages you? Who are you when your plans fail, your heart breaks, your motivation disappears, and life becomes silent? That is where real character is formed. Most people do not understand how dangerous emotional fragility has become. They want life to adjust itself to their emotions instead of strengthening their emotions to handle life. So every inconvenience becomes overwhelming, every criticism becomes personal destruction, every setback becomes an excuse to quit. But emotionally mature people think differently. They understand that pain is temporary, but weakness becomes permanent if constantly protected. Read that again carefully. Weakness grows when you constantly avoid challenge. This is why people who avoid difficult conversations become anxious during confrontation. People who avoid responsibility become overwhelmed by pressure. People who constantly escape discomfort lose confidence in themselves because deep down they know they are running. Confidence is not built by motivational quotes alone. Confidence is built by surviving things you once believed would destroy you. And that changes a person forever. You can see it in people who endured hard seasons and came out wiser. There is a certain calmness in them, a certain emotional depth. They no longer panic over small things because life already showed them what real pain looks like. Their perspective changes. Their priorities change, their energy changes. Suffering, when understood correctly, creates emotional intelligence. Now, this does not mean every painful experience automatically makes you stronger. Some people become bitter instead of better. Some people allow pain to poison their mindset. They begin living as victims emotionally trapped in their past. And that is dangerous because unresolved pain can slowly become identity. You must never allow your suffering to become your personality. Yes, life may wound you, but your wounds are not permission to surrender your future. Your difficult season is not the final chapter of your story. And one of the strongest psychological shifts a human being can make is learning to separate temporary emotions from permanent identity. Just because you feel lost today does not mean your life is lost. Just because you feel tired does not mean you are weak. Just because you failed does not mean you are a failure. Feelings change, identity remains, and this is where mental discipline becomes critical. Hard days often speak the loudest lies. During painful moments, your mind will whisper destructive thoughts. It will tell you to give up. It will convince you nothing will improve. It will make temporary darkness feel endless. But your mind is not always telling the truth when you are emotionally exhausted. That is why powerful people learn how to continue moving even when emotions are unstable. They do not wait to feel ready every day. They understand that discipline must sometimes carry them when motivation disappears. And honestly, some mornings survival itself is strength. Getting out of bed is strength. Trying again is strength. Remaining kind after disappointment is strength. Continuing despite uncertainty is strength. Never underestimate the courage required to keep going when life feels heavy, because many people silently quit on themselves long before they physically stop trying. They become mentally defeated. Their body continues living, but internally they surrendered hope years ago. And once a person loses hope, even small problems begin feeling unbearable. That is why your mindset during difficult seasons matters so much. Hard days are temporary classrooms. They are not permanent destinations. They are teaching you patience, emotional control, endurance, awareness, discipline, and perspective. Lessons that comfort could never teach you. And one day, the pain you survived will become the wisdom you speak from. One day, someone else will feel hopeless, and your story will remind them not to quit. One day, the struggle that almost broke you will become proof that you are capable of surviving far more than you once believed. But only if you keep going. Every morning, remind yourself that difficult seasons are not signs that life is against you. Sometimes they are signs that life is preparing you for responsibilities your current mind it is not yet strong enough to carry. Growth requires pressure, transformation requires discomfort, and resilience requires repetition. So when you wake up tomorrow and life feels heavy, do not immediately ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask something more powerful. What is this season teaching me? Because hard days are not here to destroy you. They are here to introduce you to the strength you have not discovered yet. And the people who become unstoppable in life are usually the ones who learned how to keep walking through storms without losing themselves in the rain. One of the most expensive mistakes a person can make in life is giving everyone unlimited access to their mind. Most people do not realize how deeply their environment affects them psychologically. They think stress comes only from major tragedies, but often the real damage comes from constant exposure to negativity, conflict, drama, criticism, manipulation, and emotional chaos. Slowly, quietly, these things drain your energy until you no longer recognize yourself. That is why one of the most important things you must tell yourself every morning is this: my peace is more important than proving myself. Because the older you become, the more you realize peace is not weakness. Peace is power. Weak people are addicted to reaction. They react to every opinion, every insult, every misunderstanding, every attack. They feel the need to defend themselves constantly. They waste emotional energy trying to correct people who already decided not to understand them. And without realizing it, they become emotionally controlled by external noise. But powerful people understand something different. They understand that not every battle deserves their presence. That changes everything. There is a certain maturity that develops when you stop feeling responsible for changing every person's perception of you. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you explain yourself. Some people will criticize you simply because your confidence reminds them of their insecurity. Some people create conflict because chaos is the only environment where they feel powerful. And if you are not careful, you will spend years emotionally exhausted trying to manage personalities that were never your responsibility to fix. This is why emotional boundaries matter so much. A boundary is not punishment. A boundary is self-respect in action. It is the ability to say, "I refuse to allow this behavior into my mind, my energy, or my peace anymore." And honestly, many people avoid setting boundaries because they fear disappointing others. They fear being disliked. They fear confrontation. So instead, They tolerate things that slowly destroy their emotional stability. But there is a dangerous consequence to constantly tolerating disrespect. Eventually, your nervous system begins living in survival mode. You become anxious easily, irritated easily, exhausted easily, not because you are weak, but because your mind was never designed to carry constant emotional chaos. Human beings absorb energy from the environments they stay connected to. Spend enough time around negativity, and eventually negativity begins shaping your thinking. Spend enough time around manipulative people, and eventually you begin doubting yourself. Spend enough time around drama, and eventually peace starts feeling unfamiliar. This is why protecting your mind is not selfish, it is necessary. And one of the hardest lessons intelligent people learn is that you cannot heal in environments that continuously damage your spirit. You cannot become emotionally healthy while constantly surrounded by toxicity. At some point, distance becomes wisdom. Now understand this carefully. Peace does not mean avoiding all conflict. Some people misunderstand that. Peace is not weakness, passivity, or silence. Peace means emotional control. It means refusing to lose yourself emotionally every time life becomes difficult. It means maintaining inner stability even when external situations become chaotic. That is real strength. Anybody can scream, anybody can react emotionally, anybody can lose control in moments of anger, but staying calm when someone tries to provoke you requires discipline. Remaining centered while others project negativity requires awareness. Walking away from unnecessary conflict requires confidence. And confident people do not feel the need to win every argument. That is something emotionally immature people struggle to understand. They believe every disagreement must end with victory, every criticism must be answered, every insult must be challenged. But truly powerful people know something most people never learn. Sometimes silence protects you more than explanation ever will. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is discernment, because not every person deserves access to your emotions. There are people who intentionally provoke reactions because your emotional response gives them a sense of control. Toxic individuals often thrive on emotional chaos. They want arguments, they want drama, they want your energy trapped inside negativity because it distracts you from your growth. And the moment you stop reacting emotionally to every provocation, their power over you begins collapsing. That is why protecting your peace requires emotional discipline daily. It means learning when to disengage, learning when to stop explaining, learning when to let people misunderstand you without emotionally collapsing. That last part is difficult for many people because human beings naturally desire acceptance. But maturity teaches you that being understood by everyone is impossible. Some people will create false versions of you in their mind, no matter what you do. If you spend your entire life fighting every misunderstanding, you will lose your peace trying to manage perceptions you cannot control. And honestly, some of the deepest suffering people experience comes from trying to emotionally carry things they were never meant to carry. Other people's opinions, other people's projections, other people's emotional instability. Eventually, you must ask yourself a difficult question. Is protecting my peace more important than proving my point? Because sometimes winning the argument costs you your emotional stability. Sometimes being right is not worth the stress, exhaustion, and mental chaos that follows. Wise people understand this deeply. They choose peace strategically, not because they are incapable of confrontation, but because they recognize that energy is valuable. Attention is valuable, mental clarity is valuable, and constantly feeding negativity drains all three. The truth is, your future depends heavily on what you allow into your mind daily. Your focus shapes your emotions. Your emotions shape your behavior shapes your life. So if your environment constantly fills you with anger, stress, distraction, and emotional exhaustion, eventually your potential begins shrinking without you noticing it. That is why inner peace is not just emotional, it is strategic. Peace allows clear thinking. Peace improves decision making. Peace protects discipline. Peace protects perspective. And people who master emotional control often move through life with a different type of power. They are harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to emotionally break, because they no longer give every person permission to disturb their spirit. So every morning, before the world floods your mind with noise, remind yourself of this truth: my peace is more important than proving myself. You do not need to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not need to explain your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You do not need to sacrifice your emotional health just to maintain toxic connections. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is protect your mind quietly and continue moving forward without chaos attached to your name. Because a peaceful mind is not an accidental gift. It is a decision made daily by people who finally realize that protecting their energy is more important than feeding every distraction demanding their attention. One of the biggest reasons people remain stuck in the same life year after year is because they overestimate motivation and underestimate discipline. They wait to feel ready before they act. They wait for inspiration before they change. They wait for confidence before they move. And while they are waiting emotionally, life keeps moving without them. That is why one of the most powerful things you must tell yourself every morning is this: discipline will take me where motivation cannot, because motivation is temporary. Discipline is identity. Motivation depends on emotion. Discipline depends on decision. And emotions are unstable. Some mornings you will feel inspired. Other mornings you will feel tired, distracted, discouraged, or mentally exhausted. If your entire future depends on how you feel each day, your life will always move inconsistently. This is why so many people start strong and disappear quickly. They become obsessed with beginnings but uncomfortable with repetition. They love excitement but resist routine. They chase intensity while avoiding consistency, and eventually they discover something painful. Success is rarely built through dramatic moments. It is built through ordinary actions repeated daily. The problem is that ordinary actions do not feel impressive in the moment. Waking up early does not feel life-changing immediately. Reading every day does not feel powerful immediately. Going to the gym consistently does not feel dramatic immediately. Practicing emotional control does not feel rewarding immediately. But over time, these small actions quietly transform identity. That is how discipline works. It changes your life invisibly before it changes your life visibly. And most people quit during the invisible stage. They stop because results are delayed. They stop because growth feels slow. They stop because nobody is applauding their effort yet. But disciplined people understand something that emotionally reactive people never fully learn. Progress often happens silently before it becomes obvious publicly. A tree grows underground long before anyone sees it above the surface. Your habits are doing the same thing. Every repeated action is shaping your future, whether you notice it or not. Every morning, you either strengthen discipline or strengthen excuses. Every day, you either build momentum or build regret. And the frightening reality is that most people do not destroy their lives through one massive mistake. They destroy their potential through small, repeated behaviors that slowly become identity. Laziness repeated becomes limitation. Distraction repeated becomes mediocrity. Excuses repeated become self-doubt. And eventually people begin calling their lack of discipline personality because they practiced it for so long. But disciplined people operate differently. They do not negotiate with every emotion. They understand that feelings change too quickly to be trusted with major decisions. So instead of asking themselves, "Do I feel motivated today?" they ask a better question: "Who am I becoming through my actions today?" That mindset changes everything. Because discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect in behavior form. It is keeping promises to yourself even when nobody is watching. It is proving to yourself repeatedly that your goals matter more than temporary comfort, and comfort is dangerous when overconsumed. People talk about comfort like it is always positive, but comfort can quietly destroy ambition. Comfort convinces people to delay growth. Comfort encourages procrastination. Comfort whispers, "You can start tomorrow." And one of the saddest things about human psychology is how quickly tomorrow becomes years. Years of delay, years of hesitation, years of wasted potential, not because people lacked talent, but because they lacked consistency. You do not need extraordinary talent to change your life. You need repetition. That is what most people refuse to accept. They want transformation without routine, confidence without discipline, success without sacrifice. But reality does not work emotionally. Reality responds to repeated behavior. Your daily habits are voting for your future every single day. And honestly, disciplined people often look gifted from the outside because most people cannot see the repetitions behind their results. They see the success, but not the mornings the person woke up tired and still worked. They see the confidence, but not the years of self-control that created it. They see the achievement, but not the sacrifices hidden underneath it. Discipline always hides behind greatness. Now understand this carefully. Discipline is not about becoming perfect. Perfection is unrealistic and emotionally exhausting. Discipline is about remaining committed even after imperfection happens. Weak people miss one day and emotionally quit. Disciplined people miss one day and continue the next. That difference matters because consistency is not built through perfection. It is built through recovery, the ability to return after failure, the ability to continue after disappointment, the ability to stay focused despite temporary setbacks. That is real mental strength, and this applies to every area of life, not just work or success. Emotional discipline matters too. The ability to control anger, the ability to stay calm under pressure, the ability to avoid reacting emotionally to every negative situation. Those things also require practice. People often think discipline only exists in physical routines, but emotional discipline may be even more important, because a person who cannot control their emotions will eventually sabotage their own future. They will destroy opportunities impulsively. They will damage relationships carelessly. They will make temporary emotions create permanent consequences. That is why disciplined people become powerful. They stop allowing feelings to control their direction constantly, and eventually, discipline creates something motivation never can: trust in yourself. That is one of the greatest rewards of consistency. You begin respecting yourself differently because you know you can rely on yourself. Your confidence becomes deeper because it is no longer built on emotion. It is built on evidence. Evidence that you continue moving even when life becomes difficult, and that type of confidence cannot be faked. So every morning, before excuses begin speaking louder than your goals, remind yourself of this truth: discipline will take me where motivation cannot. Because motivation may help you start, but discipline is what carries you through the days when excitement disappears. And your future will not be decided by your strongest emotion. It will be decided by your repeated behavior. The life you want is not created through one perfect moment. It is built quietly through the small decisions you make when nobody is watching, when nobody is praising you, and when your emotions are telling you to stop. That is where your real identity is revealed. and the people who transform their lives are usually the ones who learned how to keep going long after motivation left the room. The final thing you must tell yourself every morning is the most important of all, because every other belief in your life grows from this one truth: my inner voice is creating my destiny. Most people do not understand how powerful the human mind really is. They think their life is shaped only by external circumstances, but long before your actions shape your reality, your thoughts shape your actions. The conversation happening inside your mind every day is quietly determining your confidence, your behavior, your emotional strength, your relationships, and eventually your entire future. And the frightening part is this: most people are speaking against themselves constantly without even realizing it. They wake up and immediately begin rehearsing weakness. I'm not good enough. I always fail. Nothing ever changes. I'll probably mess this up. Nobody cares about me. I'm too late. I'm not confident. I'm unlucky. And after repeating these thoughts long enough, the mind stops questioning them and starts accepting them as identity. That is how self-destruction begins quietly, because the human brain is designed to believe what it hears repeatedly. Whatever you consistently tell yourself becomes familiar, and familiarity eventually becomes truth inside your subconscious mind. This is why two people can experience the same failure, but respond completely differently afterward. One person says, "This setback taught me something." The other says, "This proves I'll never succeed." Same event. Different internal dialogue, different future. Your life follows the direction of your strongest repeated thoughts. And that is why your inner voice matters more than most people realize. Some people spend their entire lives fighting external enemies while being completely destroyed internally by their own mind. They know how to silence critics outside of them, but they do not know how to silence the destructive voice within them. And honestly, the most dangerous criticism you will ever hear is the criticism you begin believing about yourself. Because once the mind accepts limitation, the body obeys it. You stop trying, you stop risking, you stop believing. You stop growing, not because opportunity disappeared, but because your mindset convinced you defeat was already guaranteed. This is why mentally strong people guard their inner dialogue carefully. They understand that thoughts are not harmless. Thoughts create emotional states. Emotional states create behaviors. Behaviors create patterns. And patterns eventually create destiny. Everything begins in the mind first. A person who constantly tells themselves they are weak will unconsciously avoid difficult situations. A person who constantly tells themselves they are unwanted will tolerate disrespectful relationships. A person who constantly tells themselves they are incapable will sabotage opportunities before they even begin. The mind always tries to remain consistent with the identity you repeat to yourself, and most people never intentionally create that identity. They inherit it accidentally from childhood experiences, rejection, criticism, failure, toxic relationships, or painful moments that shape the way they see themselves. One humiliating experience becomes a lifelong insecurity. One betrayal becomes permanent distrust. One failure becomes proof of worthlessness. And without awareness, people spend decades living inside psychological prisons built from old emotional wounds. But here is the truth many people need to hear. Your past may explain your mindset, but it does not have to control your future. You are not required to continue repeating the same internal story forever. That is why changing your life often begins with changing the language you use toward yourself. And no, this is not about fake positivity or pretending pain does not exist. Real mental strength is not blind optimism. Real mental strength is choosing empowering truth instead of destructive lies. There is a difference. Telling yourself "I never fail" is unrealistic, but telling yourself "I can learn from failure" creates growth. Telling yourself nothing hurts me is denial, but telling yourself I can survive difficult seasons creates resilience. Your inner voice should not be fake. It should be strong, because strength in language changes psychology. Notice how differently disciplined people speak to themselves. Even during struggle, their language remains constructive. They focus on solutions instead of helplessness. They focus on progress instead of self-pity. They speak like people who believe improvement is possible. And over time, that mindset changes their entire behavior. The mind is always listening to the words you repeat most often. That is why you must become careful with self-humiliation disguised as humor. Some people joke negatively about themselves so often that eventually the subconscious mind begins accepting those statements as truth. I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm lazy, I'm a mess. People laugh externally while internally reinforcing insecurity repeatedly. Words matter, the way you speak about yourself matters, and the people who become emotionally powerful understand that protecting their mind is a daily responsibility, not a one-time event. Every morning, they intentionally direct their thoughts instead of allowing negativity to control them automatically. Because if you do not consciously shape your mindset, the world will shape it for you. Social media will shape it. Fear will shape it. Toxic people will shape it. Failure will shape it. Comparison will shape it. And eventually, you wake up disconnected from your own potential because your mind became programmed by negativity you never challenged. This is why mornings matter psychologically. The first thoughts you feed your mind each day often influence your emotional state for hours afterward. If you wake up immediately focusing on stress, insecurity, comparison, and fear, your nervous system begins the day already emotionally exhausted. But if you wake up intentionally reminding yourself of strength, growth, resilience, discipline, and purpose, you create a completely different mental direction. That is not motivation, that is mental conditioning. And the people who master their mind often become unstoppable because they stop allowing temporary emotions to define permanent identity. They understand something most people never fully realize. Your inner voice becomes the architect of your future. So every morning, before the world speaks to you, speak to yourself first. Remind yourself who you are becoming. Remind yourself what you survived. Remind yourself what you refuse to become again. Remind yourself that your mind should be your ally, not your enemy. Because eventually, the words you repeat daily stop sounding like sentences and start becoming reality. And the quality of your life will always reflect the quality of the conversation happening inside your own mind.